Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. I was thinking about getting some new guests, and I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to have on the people that got this right, that were trolled and bullied and defamed and made fun of about how this was going to all ricochet someday, and gold was going to be at new all-time highs again, and silver was going to be on its way up. Hit my mic, sorry. And one of the people who have gotten it right for a long time, although all of us were amazed at how long they could stretch this Ponzi scheme, dog and pony show out with fraud and missing money and printed money that we don't know about and everything else. But one of the people that got this right for a long time is John Rubino at dollarcollapse.com. As a matter of fact, he started a website for a book. And then had a website that turned into the popular website it is today, dollarcollapse.com. John Rubino, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Hey, Greg, good to be back. And yeah, it did take a little longer than we thought it would, huh?
I
5 years longer.
Well, yeah, and people were, when we said things like that gold would hit new all-time high and be even higher, be five or $10,000, and come stop it, it's never going to go back up. Well, here we are. We're at another new all-time high this week. Couple of them actually. Silver is, which is I think the big story, is 24 and a quarter or something like that. And it was just a few months ago. It was in the teens, in the upper to mid-teens. But what do you think's going on? What's finally breaking out? You think this is a head fake, or do we finally have a legit breakout?
Well, the world just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and precious metals, that's where people hide out during crazy times. So, eventually money had to start flowing into real assets like that. So, it was always going to happen. But it just took a lot longer than that it seemed like it should, because, to you and me, the monetary system and governments failing everywhere that you look, it seemed like the world was primed for a shift from financial assets into real assets years ago. But central bank money printing presses are really great tools for fooling people. And it turns out they were able to maintain the illusion of stability for a lot longer than seemed likely. But now it's kind of ending. Things have the pandemic has come along to prick the everything bubble, and now we're seeing basically the failures of the big systems stripped bare. And the U.S. was kind of the last domino to fall, because in the rest of the world, in other currencies, gold was at record levels last year. There was already a big gold bull market going on, which is to say a big shift out of financial assets and into real assets, because people were worried about the stability of their governments and their currencies. It took longer to get here than seemed reasonable, but here it is. People are starting to realize that even the dollar isn't immune to mismanagement. We've been borrowing absolutely insane and accelerating amounts of money for years now. And to deal with the pandemic, we have to borrow even more. We're going to run deficits of 10 to 15% of GDP in the US this year and next year, with no real end in sight. I mean, it's not obvious how this ever goes back to normal. And people are picking up on that. So they're starting to buy gold. Gold is up. And now they're starting to buy silver, because the gap between the values of gold and silver had gotten so wide. The gold to silver ratio hit 125 or so earlier this year, which is historically off the charts. 90 used to be a really high level for the disparity between the value of gold and silver. And it usually led people to buy silver really aggressively and for silver to outperform gold. That's how it works in precious metals bull markets, at least in the mid to later parts of those kinds of bull markets. And it happened with a vengeance just lately, where silver is now dramatically outperforming gold, but silver is only about half of its previous high, whereas gold is at its all-time high in US dollars right now. So silver probably has a lot further to run. But it's fun to be a gold bug and to see your stacks getting more valuable and everything. But the real message here is that the world is on the verge of spinning out of control. And that's what gold and silver is signaling. We're just a mess with no way out of this, because even before the pandemic hit, we were running deficits in the U.S. of $1 trillion a year, which was that's a emergency level of government borrowing. But we were doing it in the 10th year of a recovery, of an expansion, when really, normally, everybody's back at work and paying taxes, and government deficits go way down, and sometimes they even turn into surpluses. That wasn't happening this time, which is a sign that basically the monetary experiment that began in 1971, when we went off the gold standard and went to all fiat currencies everywhere, that was ending. We were no longer able to manage economies with this much debt, just by printing new currency and by borrowing more money. And so, it was going to happen. The system was going to break down anyhow, but the pandemic has come along and really accelerated the process. So now the question is, is there a pain-free way of getting out of this and getting back to normality? And the answer is probably no. We got to get rid of this debt somehow that we've taken on. I think global debt to GDP is now in the 350 to 400% range, which is highest ever. We've never had a society that had borrowed this much money before. And past societies saw their monetary systems break down before they got to this point. So we are now a historical outlier in terms of how much debt we've taken on, which means the reckoning, when all this debt is wiped out one way or another, might be historically an outlier too. It might be worse than anything we've seen in the past. So I think, for gold bugs, at least, for people who've been betting on precious metals all along, this kind of seems like good times, because finally their idea for money management is starting to work out. But I think for everybody else, these are not good times, and they're not going to get better from here, because we really have no way out of this without some kind of extreme pain.
You know what I noticed about, I interviewed Bill Holter, nice guy, smart guy. Nice guy, smart guy, and he brought up the fact that he was mercilessly trolled for his, talking about how gold's going to go way up in dollar terms, but the dollar's going to crash, but very matter of fact, very, very, what can I say, very calm about it, almost like what you are like. We knew this was going to happen, right? I mean,
Well, yeah.
that's the overall. That's what I'm getting. This is the second interview I've gotten, that idea that the world's spinning out of control. There's no pain-free way to get out of this. I mean, people are going to freak out when they fully understand what you know now, what you and many other people have been talking about for the last several years, and how we got here, and how crazy what the crazy stuff they did to put it off. It wasn't like you missed. What you missed was you didn't realize the money printing in the background, the missing money, the tens of trillions of dollars in missing money, the fraud, the rip off, the criminality of the whole system to prop it up.
Yeah. Well, the online community has been surprisingly gentle with me, considering how long I've been saying this stuff. I've been saying similar things since I had black hair. It's been a long time, and so every once in a while I'll get oh man, this guy, he was saying the same thing back in 2011. Why should we listen to him? And you know what? When you're way early, that's a reasonable criticism, because there are really two parts to an investment thesis. One is the thing that's going to happen, and the other is when it's going to happen. And if you miss it by a lot of years, you might as well be wrong. So, I don't feel I'm not comfortable with the whole "I told you so" thing or anything. Coming from me, I don't feel like saying that, because I've been so early. Yeah.
It's not that you were so. What I wanted to bring up wasn't that so much that by any metric, if they were just at a normal system where people were honest, they didn't naked short sell everything and print crap loads of trillions of dollars in the background and double the amount of money that we owed when President Trump walked into office, and that was all hidden, and then they made fun of anybody who brought it up, including the only thing Ocasio-Cortez got right was the $21 trillion, and they made fun of her, and she shut up about it. But the criminality, what they did to get here, it wasn't like you just missed it. You're selling yourself short there. We missed it because of the massive fraud and money printing and overt and covert, just junk to prop this up.
Yeah, that's Greg. That's exactly right. I missed the lengths that the people in charge would go to to keep this thing going. Because um, first of all, there's never been a time when everybody has a fiat currency with an unlimited printing press, which means the whole global financial system could basically collude, and each country could watch each other's back. And they were able to kind of take turns liquefying the system. You know, China did it after the beginning of the Great Recession. They quintupled their debt and bought raw materials with all that money and pulled the global economy out of that, which looked like a recession they could never get out of. And now you've got the U.S. borrowing basically insane amounts of money. So the fact that they can create as much new currency as they want to, in retrospect, meant that they could get away with this a lot longer. And you're right. A lot of this is criminality. This is not just misguided financial management on the part of the people in charge of central banks and central governments. This is, this rises to the level of fraud. A lot of what happened when they basically said, things are okay. Trust us, we've got this under control. And really, all they were doing was borrowing huge amounts of money that they knew they could never pay back. You can look at all these different levels of all the major societies, and you find unfunded liabilities everywhere you look, which is basically promises that were made that can never be kept. And the guys making the promises with, Medicare and with Chicago's teachers' pension and California's public sector pensions, it's everywhere and endemic in every country. And it's all a lie. These guys basically made it up, knowing the numbers didn't work. And I consider that to be fraud. And I think that I'm not sure what the legal system will do with all this when it comes out. But the fact that they lied in order to preserve their own jobs and their own pensions and to be able to retire rich and move on and leave the mess to their successors, that's some kind of a crime. It's at least unethical. And, the time might come when it actually involves the legal system somehow. But it's kind of coming to an end. At least that's what it feels like. I'm kind of shy about talking about timing anymore, obviously, but this does feel like we've reached the end of the road of these tools, the ability of central banks to trick us, because all they've got left is negative interest rates, right? And that's what's going to come next. So be prepared for that. When the current V-shaped recovery turns out to be a myth, and the economy starts to slow back down again, which is to say, when it starts to drop into depression level numbers, then the central banks have no choice but to move interest rates into negative territory and to start buying back every kind of financial asset you can think of, including equities. And then we'll find out if that's something that will fool people one more time, or if everybody sees through it and runs for the exits, moves from the financial system into the world of real assets all at once. And that's kind of what's happening right now. People are, even like you said, Goldman Sachs and a lot of the other big investment banks are starting to express skepticism about the current monetary system. And, when those guys who basically, because of their business model, have to be bullish all the time, when they start sounding nervous and even panicked in some cases, then we're probably at the end of the road, because there's really nobody else left besides the central banks to try to fool us anymore if Wall Street is bailing on them. So when Goldman Sachs says gold is going to 3,000 and Bank of America comes out and says the same thing, what they're really saying is the financial system is broken, and we're advising our clients to basically get out, go hide out in some older form of money that governments can't make more of. And then, later when the system actually breaks, we'll put you back into something financial. But until then, hide out in real assets. And when you get that from the mainstream investing community, that's a real sea change, because that's generalist money. These are people, the clients of Citigroup and Bank of America, have never really thought about precious metals. So this is a new investment thesis for them. And collectively, they have so much money. that they can move the precious metals markets to the moon really easily just by going from, 0.5% allocation to precious metals to a 5% allocation to precious
Oh,
metals in the
oh my
average
gosh.
portfolio. That would be, well, that actually might not be possible. There might not be enough gold and silver available to accommodate that kind of money coming in. And that seems to be what the big investment banks are telling their people to do. So that explains the price movements lately for gold and silver, and it will explain even bigger price movements going forward if it keeps up.
There's a thing out Tuesday. I'll read it to you. Goldman warns, quote, real concerns are emerging about the dollar as reserve currency and goes, quote, all in, end quote, on gold. And I'm thinking, this is Goldman Sachs talking about going all in. That means they've already done this for a while. That's what I think that means. And when they say it's 3,000, oh, that's code for it might be 30,000.
See, if this was April 1st and that article came
Yeah,
out, I would think it was an April Fool's joke, right? Because that's such an amazing thing for the biggest
yeah.
investment house to say, because that goes against their core business model, telling people basically to bail on the mainstream financial system
It
and
tells people to
move
get
to
out
the
of equities.
sidelines. Yes, yeah. Well, I mean that's implied by this. If you think a country's currency is going to fail, then that means the equity markets are at least going to get really volatile. If you have a failing currency, frequently stocks will go up in a country, but they won't go up as much as the currency goes down. For instance, if you look at Venezuela's stock market, it goes straight up, but the real value of those equities go down because the currency is falling even faster. So that's what you're saying when you say, well, there are problems with the dollar, and we think you should get into gold. They're saying equities have become an extremely high risk proposition.
Ah,
And they're also saying bonds, which pay you in dollars, right? Bonds derive their value from the currency in which they pay interest. So that Goldman is implicitly saying that the bond market is headed for some kind of a crisis too. If the dollar drops, bonds have to drop in value and interest rates have to go up. And that's what happened in the 1970s. There aren't that many people alive who remember that anymore, but in the 1970s, the dollar started to fall in value and our bond markets just got crushed. We had to push interest rates up to 15 to 20% in the US to stop the carnage. And we don't have that option anymore, because if we tried to do that, it would bankrupt everybody in sight. So we don't have a tool to fix this if the dollar starts to fall. And see, that's the kind of the end game scenario for the financial system when the world's reserve currency starts to lose value and the central bank that's managing it doesn't have any way to stop it. Then basically everything falls apart everywhere, and that's out there. And when it happens, the early stage of it will feel kind of like the last few months here. I'm not predicting that we head straight from here to a dollar collapse or a fiat currency collapse. But the beginning stages of it, when it comes, it's going to feel a lot like this, where the big investment banks are worried and gold is going up and stocks are super volatile. That's what the early stage will feel like. So, we're getting a taste of it right now.
you are in the Seattle area. I'm going to kind of leverage this where you live here because, Seattle's nuts. Now the mayor's blaming Donald Trump for the riots, really. And then the mainstream media. I've been saying this for a while that I don't see how this is a vote getter for the Democrats. I don't see how this is a vote getter. Hey, you know who else thinks the same thing I do? The mainstream media, because they won't cover it. They keep calling it mostly peaceful, or they just don't cover it. Or they come out with crazy stuff like, oh, it's the federal agents that are causing this on day 56 of riots in Portland. The federal agents finally went in, I think, 56, 55. It's been 2 months. Barr brought this up in his testimony to Congress. But I digress. Is this going to be a vote getter for Democrats? You're up in the Seattle area, and they're watching the city burn. Does anybody even go to the Space Needle anymore? Does anybody go downtown Seattle for a nice steak dinner? Is
Well,
anybody going
Seattle.
there with Antifa and the mobs with their skateboards bashing your car windows out with you and your wife and kids in the car?
Yeah, there are big parts of Seattle and Portland right now that look like post-apocalyptic ghost towns, something you'd see in a science fiction movie. And I don't think anybody knows how this plays out politically, because on the one hand, Trump gets blamed for stuff because he's the president. You get credit for good things and blame for bad things if you're the president, just because you're the guy in charge.
How about the
And
governor and the
sometimes
mayor
it's fair, sometimes it's not. Well, yeah,
of
but
Washington and Oregon? I mean, are these people nuts? Are these people crazy? They got the mayor of Portland out with the rioters.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Running I don't want to seem sympathetic to these guys, but on some level, I kind of am, because running a big city right now would be absolutely baffling. Because on the one hand, you've got all the parents saying, you got to open the schools because we can't take having our kids at home anymore. But you've got the teachers' unions, also a very big constituency, saying, we're not going to stand in a room full of a bunch of kids who might be virus carriers and not even symptomatic. How are we going to do that? And then you've got these riots where you kind of maybe sympathize with some of the goals.
No,
and some of
I don't
the
sympathize with
points
any of the goals of Marxism. Sorry.
Well, not Marxism, but anti-racism, stuff like that.
Uh,
You as a liberal mayor probably sympathize with some of that.
Well, it's black
But
guys being hunted down by the cops ain't happening.
yeah,
Do you know how
well,
many? This is according to William Barr. Do you know how many black people have been shot by cops this year? 8.
well, okay,
8.
yeah, we've got, Greg, we have statistics on the one side and these videos on the other side, and videos have more power. So all the statistics in the world don't matter if you're sitting watching a video of some horrific thing happening to an unarmed black guy at the hands of white cops. And so that's the issue. It's how do we reconcile this stuff?
But here's the problem. You see the video of the unarmed black guy, but you don't see the video of the little girl shot in the face or shot in the head.
Right,
you don't see the
right.
police chief in St. Louis that was shot by people wanting to rob a store or a pawn shop. You don't see those videos. That's the problem. The problem is the media, the true enemy of the people.
Well,
8 people,
yeah,
8 black guys have been shot by cops. You know how many white people have been shot by cops? This is according to William Barr. 11. Let's see. The black population is 13%, 8, and the white population is way higher than that, and that's 11. So do the math on overrepresentation.
Yeah.
But it's still a small, minuscule amount.
Yeah, I agree. The statistics say one thing, and these videos say something else.
That are
but we're
pushed on us
seeing the video.
by the
Yeah,
mainstream
yeah.
press, because
Well,
the mainstream press is the enemy of the people, and they want us all to think that there's some racial thing in the country when that's a lie, and what it is a Marxist takeover. I think they want those ports out there on your end of the neck of the woods. But anyway, I digress. I don't mean to debate you, but
No,
you do have some problems,
no,
right?
I hear what you're saying. This is one of these things where it's not clear what the solution is, because there's so much misinformation, and media has so much power, and in a lot of cases that power is being abused, that if you're trying to run a city, it's not clear how you get reelected, which is really, let's be realistic. That's what the mayors of these cities are thinking right now, is how do I get 51% of the vote for the next election, And it's not clear from their point of view how they do it, because they protect the small businesses and go in and stop the rioting cold, which costs them the votes of all the rioters. Yeah, I agree. Protecting small businesses is the right thing to do. But if you're a mayor in Seattle or Portland, it may cost you your job. And so that's the thing they're wrestling with. Do they want to be political careerists, or do they want to try to do the right thing? And if it costs you your, I'm just saying I sympathize with them as politicians trying to manage something that is just this flat out crazy. Because you got the pandemic still. We forget that there's a pandemic going on, and
we forget that
quasi lockdown in a lot of places.
And we forget that you could just take hydroxychloroquine and zinc.
Yeah.
The mainstream media is lying to us about that too. But I just don't see how I don't see how video Because the mainstream media thinks this is a problem. That's why they don't cover it, and that's why they say it's that protest, peaceful protest intensified as they're trying to burn down the courthouse in Portland. That's how they couch it. So, but I don't see how this is a vote getter. I don't see how the suburban housewife in Seattle or Portland is looking at this going, man, the whole city's burned down. What? They're letting this happen?
Well, I mean, it
Not
may
for
not be.
independents either.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the mayors they don't really know right
They're
now.
stupid.
I mean, yeah. Well,
I mean, what are you going to do for a tax base? You're in Seattle, right? Does anybody go down to downtown? You're near Seattle.
Well, I'm outside of Seattle.
Does
so
anybody go down to downtown Seattle and take a trip to the Space Needle or go into the Bay?
No.
No, but why? Because they're afraid.
Yeah.
What's happening
Oh, yeah,
to the tax base down there?
Yeah, Greg, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm just saying that that the people who are trying to run these cities are completely baffled by their situation.
I think they're complete morons.
Well,
I think they're morons.
Baffled. Yeah,
and they're Marxists. I mean,
Yeah.
let's call them what they are. Forget this progressive thing. They want to overthrow America. They want to tear down our history. They're Marxists. They want to do it by violence. I mean, that's what's happening.
Yeah, but see the fact that this was coming one way or another, I think, is the important thing, because we could have easily had civil unrest coming from the right, because there are a lot of really frustrated 40-year-old white guys who used to have a good factory job, and that job got shipped to China, and now they're working at Walmart, and they're mad too. So
So are the 40-year-old black guys. There are plenty of 40-year-old black guys who had a job shipped to China too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a white phenomenon.
They're mad too, but I mean, it could have been, the guys who protested the lockdown in Michigan. Remember, they briefly took over the Michigan State House. Shooting could have started there, and that could have metastasized into something where it was a completely different group of people in the streets rioting. And the reason that so many different groups are so angry right now is because the system no longer works for people. We've got an aristocracy that is harvesting the rest of us. 1% of the population gets richer and richer year after year at the expense of everybody else. So we've got lots of groups of really frustrated people out there. And I think there's an element of the rich pitting different groups of non-rich against each other.
You may be right about that.
Yeah, and so Antifa is in the streets against the Tea Party or whatever, and the aristocracy loves that, because it means those guys are focusing on each other and they're not looking at the real enemy, which is the political class and the guys running the big banks and corporate CEOs who are shipping jobs over to China and getting richer at every stage of the process. The stock market is up during the pandemic. The rich got much, much richer while the lockdown was going on. And I think that is the real issue, and the biggest fear of the 1% is probably that the guys who are out in the street right now battling each other realize that they aren't really each other's enemy and that they have a common enemy. And then, the peasants grab their pitchforks and their torches and head to the castle, and you get something that at least is understandable and has some moral basis to it. We should be mad at the people who are getting richer every year, while the rest of us, at best, tread water, and at worst, get pushed down the rungs of the economic ladder until we're not middle class anymore, we're not working class anymore, we're the working poor. And to me, the stuff that's going on in cities right now is a distraction from the real battle, which is how are we going to restore, competition and individual freedom and upward mobility in a society where those things are largely gone. So it's frustrating because we're doing things that don't get us any further towards that goal right now. And I guess I just wish people would see who the real enemy is and stop fighting with each other, because this is really frustrating, and there's no way that the civil unrest that's happening right now in cities takes us anywhere that useful, no matter how it plays out, no matter how it's resolved, whether the National Guard comes in and clears everybody out, or the people who are doing the rioting get what they want. None of that is going to fix anything. The only thing that will fix something, fix the real issues, it would be something like antitrust enforcement, where we go in and say, all right, 6 companies own most of the media in the United States. That's unacceptable. We're going to break it up so 50 companies own the media, or the big banks. 5 or 6 banks own most of the U.S. financial system. And of course, they're running that financial system to enrich themselves. Well, J.P. Morgan Chase becomes 5 banks going forward. Something like that would actually fix. Well, it would move us in the direction of fixing things. We can't actually fix anything without the big financial crisis that has to come. But at least we would be doing things that in the long run work. That I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No, I
To
think it's a
digress
great
from
discussion.
yeah,
I think this is a
but
great
it's just
discussion that came about because of all the writing and all that. And you made some really good points about the
yeah.
real enemy, and that the real enemy were the people that removed the Glass-Steagall Act, and we had too big to fail. I mean, we
Hmm.
should, people like, oh, capitalism doesn't work. Oh yeah, it does. You bring back bankruptcy.
And
You had
I got to
stupid people
say,
like Warren Buffett, making this excuse about my secretary pays more. The people have heard this before, more taxes than I do. Yes, your secretary doesn't get multi-trillion-dollar bailouts, you buffoon, Warren Buffett. You
yeah. See,
incompetent buffoon.
yeah. Well, see that's the thing. And after the banking crisis and the housing bust in 2007, 2008, we could have gone in and assigned blame to the people who caused the crisis, and instead we bailed them out. We made them richer,
Yeah,
while we let people who can't make their mortgage payments lose their houses. It was completely the opposite of the response that we should have had to that. And I mean, that wasn't the beginning of our problems. Our problems started earlier, but that was a chance to start moving in the right direction. If we had perp walked the top 1,000 guys from the big Wall Street investment banks and then indicted them and imprisoned a bunch of them, then the system would have learned that, oh, okay, there's a limit to how many crimes we can commit,
yes,
before, and they didn't learn that. They learned the opposite, that anything is possible, because the government will always leave you alone and bail you out. And that infamous speech by Eric Holder, Obama's attorney general, where he said that, well, we can't arrest and indict bankers because that would destabilize the financial system. So we're just going to fine them when they commit crimes. So, from that day forward, banks just paid protection money to the government, right? And they committed any crimes they wanted to commit, and they paid a pittance in relative terms in fines and got away with everything else. Not a
excellent
single
point.
banker went, yeah. And and
Excellent
and
point.
so yeah, so that's our chance, to learn that lesson and do something different next time around. That's what we have to do. And the people who are in the streets right now are victims, even though they're not behaving well, and they shouldn't be allowed to behave as badly as they are. They're still victims of this system, and it's the system that's the real enemy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Real estate. You have people leaving the cities. You have this bounce in real estate prices for now. Eventually, rates go up and real estate crashes. Is that your thesis, or tell me what you think will
Yeah.
happen?
Greg, house prices going up right now is one of the most baffling things that I've ever seen. And all the time I've been paying attention to this stuff, because normally, well, housing is super cyclical, right? It goes up in good times and down in bad times. And this is, borderline depression level recession that we're in right now. And house prices are going up. I really can't explain it, because who's house hunting now? It doesn't seem like a very smart thing to do if you already have a house. There's a pandemic, it's scary. There's civil unrest out there, the economy's tanking, and you're out trying to buy a new, bigger house. The only thing that could explain part of this is that mortgage rates are down a little bit. But that's not, I don't think that's enough to cause this borderline housing bubble that we have right now, where prices are beyond their 2006 levels in a lot of cases. Um, so yeah, I think you're right. I think that this is temporary, and that when it's clear the economy is not going to snap right back to quote unquote normal, then the housing market is going to roll over
Hard.
because, yeah, well, yes, their houses are overpriced, and it's not clear where people are going to get the money with which to pay these new big mortgages that they're taking on. So we could see a wave of defaults here pretty soon, where a lot of people with mortgages just can't cover their mortgages anymore because their job went away and never came back, and then that's going to affect the housing market. But I didn't think this could happen. So I'm not a really good source of information about what's going to happen in the housing market because this didn't seem possible, so hopefully some of the laws of finance will still apply, supply and demand
I
and
know.
cost, and but who knows? They aren't applying right this minute, so it's not clear when they apply again. But I suspect it's pretty soon, just based on what's happening in the rest of the economy.
Where do you think gold and silver will be at the end of the year? This is where we started. Or
I
where do you
have
think the dollar
absolute,
will be? Well, the
yeah.
dollar. Miss Shedlock had this on saying, "Oh, it's gold is corresponding to the dollar." Says no, it's not. It was 93 on the USDX in '06 and all these different years, and gold was here, 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 and but the gold is on its way up. It looks like.
Well, it definitely has some momentum. But even in the best bull markets, you have really stomach churning corrections just because you build in so many people who might want to take some profits, right? There's a lot of profits in gold and silver to be taken now. And if somebody decides, or a lot of people decide to start taking them, they could still go down by 20 or 30% from here before they take off again. So I have no idea where gold and silver will be at year end. But I'm comfortable saying that gold is going to go to $5,000 to $10,000 eventually, and silver is going to go to $100 to $200 eventually. We just don't know exactly what happens when, within that nice long bull market, because that's what it's going to look like at the end of the process. 10 years from now, you can pull up a gold chart, and it'll look like an unbroken string of new highs from here to there. But in reality, there will be some corrections in there that are really scary, but that are actually buying opportunities. So this is now a buy the dip market. We don't know when the dips are going to come. We don't know how big they'll be, but because the long uptrend, the longer term trend for gold and silver are in place, and nothing is going to stop them short of their ultimate fair value, which is way higher than this. You definitely want to treat the corrections that are going to come, that are inevitable, as buying opportunities. Just like, if somebody understood what was going to happen with Amazon stock a decade ago, every time it went down, they would have bought more. And gold and silver are like that now. They're going to go up to much higher levels at some point. So when you get a chance to buy them cheaper, that's something you should be doing. Same thing with the mining stocks. They're even more volatile than precious metals, and they've been rocking lately. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see a correction in the near term in the gold and silver miners. But if there is one, that's when you want to load up the truck, because over the intermediate to long term, these things can't go anywhere but higher based on the mistakes we're making in the rest of the financial system.
No fixing it. There's no real fix other than a wipeout.
Well, when you have a huge amount of debt, there's not really much you can do with it, right? If you can't cover the interest payments on your debt, you either have to go bankrupt and wipe it out through default, which is the 1930s depression, or you create enough new currency to make the dollars, or the currency in general, that you're using to pay back your debt cheaper, and that makes the debt manageable. But that's an inflation, possibly a hyperinflation. So you might get, Weimar Germany or something when you try to do that. And that's our two choices. We have no other way to
Or
get out
there's
of
a
it.
third choice. You know what that is? And I've always said this: do both, default and inflate, because there's so much debt. Default and deflate
Well,
at the same time.
there's
Inflate.
a reasonable chance that the default comes first too, where we have a crisis where a lot of people start going bankrupt, and their debt is wiped out via bankruptcy, but the government panics and then tries to inflate away the rest of the debt, and then we get the inflation. So deflation first, and followed by inflation, is a very real possibility too, which just complicates things from an investor standpoint, but it makes intuitive sense that it could happen that way.
John Rubino, talk about you have a subscription service. It's free. You don't. I don't think you sell your list either, but you send out some of your work. You're a prolific writer on dollarcollapse.com. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have an email list on that website, and so you can pull up the page, put in your email address, and then I'll just send you whatever I write. And I usually publish something 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, very good, very good. And you're a prolific writer. You're a smart guy. Dollarcollapse.com is the website. John Rubino is the founder and also the a prolific writer on that site. He has many other good things, top 10 videos and all kinds of other stuff. It's a great site. John Rubino, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks, Greg.